Hi everyone, thanks for joining us on this next episode of Pro Tools Answers. Now before we go on, got to let you know that this episode is actually going to end up being in two parts. Reason being, it's a episode on feature requests for Pro Tools, and as you can imagine, the conversation went on just a little bit. So this is part one. Hope you enjoy. We'll be releasing part two next week. Have fun. Hello and welcome to Pro Tools Answers, where we discuss, demonstrate and elaborate on your Pro Tools questions put in the official Avid Pro Tools forum in Facebook land. My name is Dave Phillips, audio engineer, ACI and lecturer for Point Blank Music Schools in the UK, and joining me is Anders at Tonecraft Work in Austria, ACI and lecturer for Siegen University in Germany.
Hi everyone.
And Andy Hageman, Avid's audio curriculum manager based all the way over in Tokyo.
How's it going?
Thanks for joining me, guys. It's great to see you as always. This is definitely my favourite part of the week, there's no question. Before I continue, let me ask you guys out there, if you could please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you're notified when all of our new videos are released. Hopefully this is helping you guys so far, and I'm sure it would help you to know when all of the new videos are being released. And of course, if you like our video, please hit like. And if you don't like it, you're welcome to dislike it.
Keep it to yourself.
Yeah, there's a like button, there's a dislike button, and there's a I'll keep it to myself button. So this episode is going to be a little different to our typical format. Now, Anders and I waded in on a post in the Advanced Users Forum on Facebook last week regarding feature requests. And we were actually quite surprised to see how many features were being suggested that actually already exists in Pro Tools. So we thought that this would be a really interesting subject to discuss on the show today. And this is why we really advocate training, isn't it? Because many forget that Pro Tools is actually a professional tool first, and I think maybe a home tool as a secondary thing. Would that be right to say?
Yeah, I think it is. It's definitely a professional platform, and sometimes that can make it a little bit more challenging to casually wander into, right? Doesn't mean that it's not fantastic for stuff that you can do at home, but there is a lot of depth in the software.
Yeah, well, if you can do absolutely anything in the studio, you can do absolutely anything in your bedroom, right? It all matches up. So it's an incredibly capable tool, but it's so evident from posts that the users are not fully aware of what the software can do. So we thought what we'd do is we'd go through this post, we hopefully debunk some myths, we'll hopefully show you where some things are, we might rationalize for why some things are the way they are, and maybe we might even agree with you. But before we go on that point, I think Andy might have a disclaimer. So this is
yes, I actually work for Avid, and the burden of this job is knowing stuff that's coming and being unable to talk about it legally, right? So so if something is in the works as a feature request, or if it's not, I can neither confirm or deny.
No, but we should also say, Anders and I, although we work kind of on behalf of Avid, we don't work for Avid. You do work for Avid. None of our opinions are representative of Avid. Anything that we say it shouldn't be taken as this is on the way, wink, wink, should it?
Right.
We're just having a general discussion here. So let's deep dive into the features that would be best to add to Pro Tools, inspired by our post from Daniel, who asks, what features do you think Avid needs to implement for Pro Tools? And when Anders and I waded on this, it was evidently very early in the conversation. There were just a few answers. I think it's now under just under 200. So we obviously can't go through all of them. We can't discuss everything, but we've kind of gone through everything, and we've headed a few things. So we're going to deep dive into a few well, I say deep, dive into a few things, and see if we can just show people, where things are and whatnot. So the one of the first things that was asked for, and I'm going to remember to share my screen this time with you guys, because you've been taking my word for it that I've been showing the correct stuff, and you don't know until it actually gets released, at which point it's too late. So the first thing that was asked for was customizing the mix and the edit window views, and there are a couple of ways that we can customize the edit window. If you're working on smaller MacBooks, screen real estate is at a premium, really. Different people will like to work different ways. We really only have a couple of windows in Pro Tools that will work on a majority of the time, and although some people will like to, let's say, just tile our windows like that, so we can see a little bit of mix window, we can see a little bit of edit window, we can also tile it horizontally as well. It's not available to me at the moment. Some people want to work that way, others won't. I would wager that a majority of us actually kind of prefer to work in these two views. I mean, certainly if you're editing, you'll spend a lot of time in here. If you want to flip over to the edit window, we can do that, and we can flick between these two just by holding down Command and equals, right? You don't need to use up screen real estate by having both of them there. We have a single key command that we can switch between the two. So we could argue that there's not necessarily any need to cascade our screens or to tile our screens and split them into various sections, but I certainly recognize that some people will want to do that, but that feature is in there, right? Go to the window menu, we hit arrange, and we can either kind of go to a couple of the presets that Avid will allow us, or we can open up some of the windows and we can arrange them in ways that we see fit. Let's open up the MIDI editor as well, and then we'll throw that down there. So once we have that in place, we can actually save our Windows configurations. So we can hit new configuration, we can save them in the way that we want to. We can include certain things within this. We can hit OK, and then that is available to us to return to if ever we want to. Right now, one of the downsides with this is that it's something that doesn't necessarily transfer over from session to session, does it? This is session based. Now, one way that you could potentially get around that is to have yourself a specific Pro Tools session that you don't do anything with. You just open up create a brand new session, arrange the windows as you want to, save that session, and then one thing that's really nice is to be able to import session data from other sessions. So you could use this particular file as a like a template, and then you can import the session data from that template and just import the window configuration. So it's a little bit of a workaround, but it seems to work. It's just a couple of clicks, and then you can bring a Windows configuration over from one session into another.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, sorry, go ahead.
One alternative to that is, of course, to save the session as a template so that it's available to you in the dashboard when you're creating a new one. So if you go ahead and go File, Save as Template, and save that into a category or something. So let's save that, Dave. And once Dave saved this, the next time he's starting a new Pro Tools session, he will just create the new session from the template instead, if you don't want to do import session data.
And it pulls the Windows configurations and the memory locations that are that template. So, as far as customization goes, I mean, folks tend to find something that they do a lot and refine the way that they want to approach, so that a lot of times people wind up building exactly the same session over and over and over again. And if you do it more than 2 or 3 times, that's a perfect time to tweak it out, make sure it's perfect, and then save it as a template. I think Anders is 100% right, 0% wrong.
Yeah, exactly the same thing with routing. If you're using master faders in a particular way, the master fader auxiliary as your 2-bus solution. Those things that you do every time.
And so, if you, sorry, Andy, you go ahead.
Yeah, let me show, if I could. Let me grab the screen and show a couple of things that sometimes people don't know with memory with Windows configurations. So, window configurations. What Dave showed before was having a bunch of layouts that that he saves as a Windows configuration. But it's not just the position of the windows. Let's take a look. So I've got this configuration right here, and this is a basic edit window setup. And let me start to throw some shortcuts, because you could go to Window, Configuration, New Configuration, but there doesn't look to be any shortcut here, but there is. If you want to create a new Windows configuration, the shortcut is period, the number that you want to create, and the plus key. And what that will do is that opens up the new configuration window.
Can you just give us that shortcut again? Because I think your voice went zzz for
sorry.
Right over the key point.
So it is period, the number that you want to create, and plus, all on the numeric keypad. Yeah. And I'm going to call this basic edit.
The numerical keypad is the important factor there, isn't
That's
it?
right.
It doesn't work on the regular keyboard.
Now here's the thing. I'm going to leave exactly where it is, but I'm going to show different stuff. So I want to show seconds. I want to show my markers. I want to show, let's see what else, meter. And I want to show inserts A through E, sends A through E. I want to show my tracks list. And I want this clips list to be in a different position. I haven't moved the window, but I've changed the arrangement within it. And so I'm going to go here, period 2 plus, and I'm going to call this edit 2. Now, if you want to recall a Windows configuration, you can go up here to Window, Configurations, and you can click these guys, but there's a shortcut for that. So period, the number that to recall, and the asterisk will recall that Windows configuration. So I hit period 1 asterisk, and notice that the window didn't move, but the view of it and the layout within that single window. So I'm going to go here, period 2 asterisk, and now it's going to go to the other one. That's one thing. The second one is this, and this is something that was completely unknown until somebody figured out that it works. So I'm going to go here to Audio Suite. One thing that people about is that there's batch processing inside of Pro Tools. But there is a tremendously useful workaround. Let's see. I'm going to use, I'll put a compressor in here.
This was, by the way, also one of the questions that came up in the post, Andy, batch processing. Why don't Pro
Oh, really?
Tools
There
do
you go.
that? Yeah.
So I'm going to create this. So I've got my Audio Suite. And I'm going to down Shift, and I'm going to put an EQ in here, 7-band EQ, great. And because batch processing is very commonly done with game audio, I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm going to put normalize, just because, where is normalize?
Be under other, I think.
Other, yeah.
Sorry. Where is normalize?
Further down?
It's further down.
There it is.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. There we go. And so now I can put these anywhere I want. Now, watch this. This is the thing that when we were beta testing it, it was like, holy cow, that's interesting. Remember I live in Japan, so I called this EQ Fuji by the lake. And I'm going to change this to, I'm going to move the threshold way down, and I'm going to change this. So here is and I'm going to have all of these work outside of the playlist. So this is a very common kind of, these are settings, but these are common layouts of what I might use for batch processing. I'm going to save this as period 3 plus, and I'll call this Fuji. And then I'm going to go set this. And this one we call Tokyo Tower by the lake. And period 4 plus.
When you Andy, just for a second, while you've got that window open, because you're just relate the number to where that number is, what the number relates to. Sorry, on the Windows configuration, because you're saying period number star.
So if you go here, I hit period number plus.
Yeah.
Sorry, period 1 plus, and I created my basic edit.
Yeah. And
2 plus created edit.
Yeah, and that
period 3 plus created.
And that shows up on the top left-hand side of the new configuration window.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
So it's going to show up in this area right here. It automatically populates this.
I just wanted to make that connection. That's all.
No, very good. Now the cool thing is now if I recall Windows configuration 2 or what am I talking about? 3 period 3 asterisk, and not only does it recall the windows and the position, but also with Audio Suite recalls the position of the knobs and the faders and all the which is nuts. And basically now if I wanted to do batch processing on this, all I'd have to do is do this, boom, select those, render, and then render this and render this. So it's three clicks, and I've got all the plugins that I can possibly use in Pro Tools, but I could apply them in a different way if you understand this interesting behavior of Windows configurations.
That's a great way to use window configurations, Andy. I'm sure that a lot of people will be ecstatic about that. One more thing, slightly more basic here, but if you're using if you're in the edit window like I am right now, there's just so much customization that can be done here. You saw Andy displaying and hiding features of the track. What I usually do is I have inserts and sends open, and also the I/O view, because I love that, because at just a click I can bring out a fader for each channel without being having to go to the mix window. I love that feature, and I can insert inserts or send stuff, and of course customizing what rulers you're looking at. But not only that, up in the toolbar itself you can customize by clicking the little disclosure triangle up in the right hand corner. You can add or remove elements, and if you don't like the where they are placed, you can hold command and drag the features around to different locations if you're into that kind of things. I don't know anyone that actually does that, but you can if you really like to.
Yes.
And those, by the way, are globals, meaning the next time you open Pro Tools, it will actually stay that way.
Yeah. So saving your own custom configurations isn't just about screens, is it? It's also about how the screens look. So the level of customization is really high, and it's not necessarily difficult to bring those configurations back into newer sessions. So we have our first feature. There you go. We've provided you with the feature that you requested.
So that was really quick, Avid. Thank you.
My pleasure.
The next one I wanted to come on to this is an interesting one. Modifiable shortcuts. Now this will be a relatively quick conversation, won't it?
Yeah.
Because we don't have modifiable shortcuts. Now, we just started using Camtasia to film the show. And one of the first things that I did when I loaded up the software was to change a lot of the shortcuts in Camtasia, incidentally, to the Pro Tools shortcuts, because I'm so used to doing them. So I can understand why people want this, but there's a very good reason why it's never going to appear, or unlikely to appear, I should say.
So, way back when we had a conversation internally in Avid at some point, it came up about should we should we do this? Should we have customizable? And it's not. It's a topic that might come up again in the future. But when it did come up way back in many years ago, interestingly enough, many professionals came to us saying, please don't do this. And the reason why was because one of the great conveniences of Pro Tools is that you can walk from one studio into another studio that has Pro Tools, and there are certain things that are customizable, as you just saw, but there are certain things you could also rely upon, and shortcuts, because you start to use Pro Tools for years, and you're not going to even remember where the menu item is anymore. You're not going to remember anything but the shortcut, right? And a lot of people work so quickly with the shortcuts. If you start to change that, then you start to make people's days a little bit longer. Now, I'm not going to say it won't come back at some point, and of course it's an open discussion. But if somebody wants to customize shortcuts, I recommend taking a look at the Pro Tools Control app, or it's now called the Avid Control app, which has not only customizable buttons that you can have for anything, but macros, so you can have sequences of events, and that's on your iPad. And you walk into a studio with your iPad, connect it in, and guess what? The customization that you want, you can work on it while you're there, and then you shut off your iPad and you leave, and you've done no changing to the system itself. So the next person that comes in won't be disrupted.
And it's just a bit of time spent over lunchtime, isn't it? Just programming in your macros into your pad or your phone.
Yeah. No, it's macros too, which is something that obviously is beyond even shortcuts. So you can customize inside the Apple app to a far greater extent than you can customize pretty much any software.
Yeah, and I think also the system is so well thought out. There's so much thought gone into the shortcuts of Pro Tools and the different families and how they relate to each other. I think that I would at least I would just mess that system up, and it wouldn't come out any better in the long run. Maybe if you only use 5-6 shortcuts, it's okay, but there are so many shortcuts. I mean, the shortcuts manual is about 95 pages, and that's not even all of them.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's some justifications for very good justifications for why we won't see customizable shortcuts on the thing. I mean, and I think people forget, or maybe even don't know, that there's an entire industry out there surrounding Pro Tools where the certified experts will get bought in specifically to drive Pro Tools on various days. Facilities will just exist to be able to hire, as Andy said, so people can go in to use specific systems. And you want to know what you're going into. And I mean, if you've gone through our training programs, you're taught all of the shortcuts. You know them, and obviously the more you use them, the more they become ingrained into you. So.
Right. No, completely. I mean, that's one of the nice things about learning Pro Tools. Not to toot, training's horn or anything like that, but there's real cash value in learning Pro Tools if you want to have a career in audio production, because Pro Tools is going to be ubiquitous in the industry. And the great thing is that everything that you learn, even the stuff that you learn in a non-Ultimate system, is migratable. So Pro Tools Ultimate and Pro Tools Standard look the same. They add for most. It's just there's more stuff in Pro Tools Ultimate, but it's not different stuff, right? So all of that, everything that you learn, including all the shortcuts, obviously is a migratable skill.
Even starting from Pro Tools first.
Even starting from Pro Tools first, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, the next subject was an interesting one, because I think this confused us a little bit, because the feature request was track instances, and it was essentially the ability to change, the ability to make changes on one track that will be reflected on another track. Now, this is where grouping is going to come into it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, Anders, I think you wanted to. Did you want to talk about this one?
Yeah. I think this is an Andy question. He's the master of groups. I think let's do Andy on this one, and I'll just fill in stuff.
So one of the things that I think, I'll share again. I've got over here, down here at the very bottom in the lower left-hand corner of the edit window, I've got two different groups. By the way, Another thing that I think people were mentioning in the feature request is window management. And I've all of these floating windows. Before we do this, let me throw another display shortcut at you. Control, Command, and Option, and W. Okay, so the bottom three is in the left-hand corner of your keyboard, which I colloquially call power claw. So those three keys and W will hide all your floating windows. They don't close them. So if you ever wanted to bring them back, you click that key again and they come right back. So now I've got my window. Now I've got...
That's a great one. That's a great one.
It's so useful, right?
Control, Alt, and Command, right?
Control, Command, and Option. It's the
Yeah.
bottom three keys in the lower left-hand corner of your keyboard on Windows or Mac. And W. So W, and that, do what you want to do. Now I've got, like I said, I've got these two groups. Both groups right now are created, but they are inactive. So I can, for example, if I wanted to, let me see which tracks are the ones that I'm going to be. Come on. Okay, so here's my synth group, okay? Right now, my synth group is inactive, so I could work on, so for example, I could select over here. Why is that doing it?
Yeah, I think you grabbed the wrong guys. It's the tracks below, right? Oh.
Let's go over here. Yeah. There we go. So here we go, and I've got this selected, and I could make a change, and I could delete this. Great, and I've got one track that's changed. If I wanted to, I could activate this group, and then what's going to happen is on all of the grouped tracks, that editing will happen on the same. So boom, and now the editing has, and you can create up to 104 groups, and with those groups, you can organize a number of different things. Now, let me go ahead just to show you a couple of changes I have in here. I'm going to let's go ahead and I'm going to select, let's say, these tracks. Okay, so these tracks right here, so these, whatever my intro, my key one sub stuff are. The shortcut is Command G, and then you're going to see here that I've got my group. So this is a keyboard group. Here's a trick. I'm going to call this, and I'm going to select Group K. Sometimes people just let K for keyboard. Some people just let the idea it chooses whichever the first available letter is. I'm going to choose Group K, and you'll see in a second. I'm going to choose Group K, and if I wanted to, I can add or remove any of these, but it will by default have the tracks that are selected. So I'm happy with that. Now, Anders, to also the solo buttons or not?
Yeah, I usually would like them grouped, so you have to go in and edit the group, right?
So I can configure this any way that I want to. I can either, and this is where it gets a little bit complex, you can either have it follow your global settings, or you can have it have custom attributes. Now, what I'm going to do here, because I want it off, is I want to not have it follow the globals, and I want to have it follow specific attributes. So, Anders, you're my customer, so probably volume, right?
Yeah.
And you said solo, yes.
Yes.
Record enable. This that people could either want it a lot or desperately not want it to happen. So if I'm recording drums, great. But for recording other things, maybe no good. And you can choose whatever you want as far as what you want to group, including inserts and sends. So I could have volumes, my controls over here on inserts A and B, but not the rest. I could have send grouped, the volume only on send F. I've got a lot of different things that I can customize. Now, once I click OK, then the group will be created. Boom. Now, Group K is active. And if I change my keyboard focus, if I go over here and I change my keyboard focus, and I click this little A to Z button, now hitting the K key is on and off that group. And if I go to the mix window, the only place where keyboard focus can be, the groups list. So I can turn on and off the key group by hitting the K key, because
just
I
one
called
key.
it just one key.
Just one key.
Now the other thing that I think a lot of people will miss, and I didn't show this, I can modify this group. You can have a group that only exists in the edit windows. It will group your editing, but it won't group anything in the mix window. So you can have either only an edit group or only a group. Or you can have one like I've got here, which is the default mix and edit, and you can mix together a number of different things. Now, the last thing is that these attributes and the globals are Pro Tools Ultimate software. So you're going to find a simpler version of the things that you can group and the things that you can't group. You still have options. You just have fewer of them in Pro Tools standard software.
Yeah, that's a great way to use groups, Andy.
Groups,
I really like that.
Yeah, groups was the subject of another question as well, because there was a user who was asking why, is it possible to edit multiple tracks all at the same time? I think he was talking specifically about drums. So and that's one of the most basic functions of what groups are supposed to be for, isn't it? So
yeah, edit groups. Yeah.
If I can have control of Zoom,
sure,
I can show this to you, because I'm sure you've never seen this before. This will be the ultimate sugar cube for the episode. So with our drums groups, and we've got a group down here called drum kit, and that includes any of the drum elements. So the kick tracks, the kick out, the snare, we've got the hi-hat, we've got overheads in there. And we can see that I've got a selection that is extended across each of those tracks. And as Andy showed how to create us a new track, this is one of the benefits of having a bunch of tracks contained within a group, because whatever you do to one track, all of the same thing will happen to all of those other tracks within that group. So if I want to make a selection, and as the particular user was asking, how can I edit the clips over for my entire drum kit? Let's just trim that. And at the moment I've got my Smart Tool open, or on rather. So I can now trim all of these clips across my entire drum kit, and I can do anything to that. I can delete them. I can duplicate them with Command D. I can undo with Command Z. So if a track is part of a group, whatever you do to one of them will happen to all of the others. And this is just a basic feature of what the groups are supposed to be for. So there you go. Another feature added.
Yeah, I can attach something onto that as
Sure.
well. If you let me share my screen here. Thank you. So maybe you don't want to group stuff or don't want to group tracks in an edit group, even though you really quickly can turn them on and off, like Andy just showed, or activate and deactivate them. Another thing that you could do is just create a clip group instead. So I use Option Command G to clip group them, and in this case they're actually also working as one clip that I can cut into as one unit, and even though it's one MIDI clip and an audio clip, they're actually being edited at the same time. And at any point of time that I want to, I can ungroup this clip group again, Option Command U, so that I have separate clips again. That's another way to do the same thing.
I love that. I use that regularly with backing vocals, where you've got lots of stacks of BVs, and the work when you're syncing video as well.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I used to use edit groups on all the time, every day. And I use edit groups relatively rarely these days, because what I used to use edit groups for, I use clip groups for now. So
Me too.
groups in my world these days, I almost if I say I'm going to create a group, you can assume it's for mixing, right? Because I just don't use groups for editing because of exactly what Andrew said, your edit or your clip groups.
Yeah, clip groups are great. Next question, Dave.
Okay, so this one is very close to my heart because I'm a big advocate of using the markers and using the marker lane. And the marker lane is useful, as we've seen, I think, a couple of times over the episodes, that I'll use them to denote different sections in the song.
So what's the question in the forum?
So it was about being able to jump between markers. How can we jump between markers? Presumably to get to specific sections of song. I mean, I think what the question or the particular comment was, be able to jump from one marker to another. So I assumed that he means linearly, right? Literally go from one marker to another. But if you've got a whole bunch of markers on your Pro Tools timeline, we can actually go one better than that. If I open up the memory locations window.
Can you share your screen, Dave?
Sorry, I will.
I love this show. This is awesome. This is the best way to do a Monday night.
It is.
So every time I create any kind of memory location, I mean, we call them markers because that's typically what we see a majority of the time, isn't it? They're on the marker lane, so we just call them markers. But the official term really is memory location. Every time you create one of these, and we can do that with the Enter key on a numerical keypad, or if you're using a Mac, a MacBook Pro rather, the FN key and the Enter key also does the same thing. We can type in our markers and they appear on the memory locations window. Now that's kind of important for something else I'm going to show after, as long as I don't forget, because I've got the memory of a goldfish. But as you notice, just like with the memory, the window configuration thing box, there are numbers attached to these. And so similar to Andy's shortcut, we can jump between these markers with the shortcut period, whatever the number of the memory location is. So I'm going to go into the first chorus at memory location 4. I'm going to type period 4 period, and notice that the chorus has been highlighted, but also my cursor has jumped over to chorus. Now let's go over to verse 1, which is memory location 1. And these are just all out of order because I've just created them all in the wrong order. And you can go in and reconfigure those, but it's kind of more ideal to do them one at a time. And that's what that shortcut, once again, is period on the numerical keyboard, the number of the memory location, and then period again. So it's very, very similar to Andy's shortcut, and similar with if you've got a control surface that allows the programmable soft keys, you can program, like instead of RTZ, you can program go back to your first marker. But what's also quite cool is because the memory locations are not just marker based, I could create myself, let's say I'm going to create an entire bounce range for my track, and you notice that I've got a marker here that says out, and that accounts for the basically when the song finishes. It accounts for the tails and a little bit of space at the end of the song for when I kind of feel that the next track on the CD would start. And I know it's typically kind of a mastering engineer's kind of workflow, that's what they'd be considering, but I kind of programmed that into my tracks as well. And what I want to be doing is making a bounce range edit point. This doesn't seem to be working for me very well. There we go. So I want to create myself a bounce range. So if I select intro here and then hold down shift and press out, we can see that Pro Tools has made a timeline shift for my entire song, right? So I'm going to press enter again, and instead of creating a marker, I'm going to create a selection, and I'm just going to call that, I'm going to set that as marker number 10, and I'm going to name this as mix. So that is now how much of the song I want to bounce from the beginning all the way to the end, and I can make sure that that always stays the same. No matter what kind of moves I do after that, I can always click on that mix memory location, and it will reinstigate that that timing selection.
Exactly.
I can do exactly the same thing with the shortcut period 10 period, and it will reinstigate my mix. So again, if you're wanting to program that into your iPad app or onto your soft keys, you can always make sure that you have a button that will be the length that you want to bounce your mix down. So from the original feature request, if I just want to be able to move to different sections on my song using the markers, well, there you go. Shortcut period, whatever the number is, period, you can jump to very specific sections, but we can also use that to then just expand on that functionality as well.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I think Andy would like to say the same things.
No,
you don't
go ahead.
you don't even have to have the memory locations window off open at the time. It will work just without it. But one thing also, when you're creating markers, you can actually use a shortcut to get the naming right at the very instant. Instead of pressing enter, you do. If I want to add marker number 10, I do. What's it called? Is it a point or is it dot? What do you say?
I always say dot. I think it's
okay. So
period is the official term.
Okay,
I think.
so
Or
it's
full stop.
So I will do period 10 enter, and that will create period 10 enter, and that will create a new memory location with the number 10. And of course, that's a very, very fast way to do it if you know what number you want. And another thing is that these can also be opened as part of, if you import session data, you can also import memory locations. So you can reuse them.
Right. Okay. Can I show some stuff?
Please.
Sorry.
So no, it's all right. No, this is all great. So one of the things that I don't like to do specifically, because I have all the grace of a baboon, is I don't like to click on actually click on the memory location icon, because I'm always so paranoid that I'm going to move it.
Yeah, me too.
Now, one of the things that Dave showed is that you can have a memory location, or a memory location that is a selection, and you have, for example, your area. Now, there's another way you can do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create memory location 1. I'm just not even going to name it. I'm going to put that over here. And let me show my markers. So there's my little marker of memory location over here. And I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to create another memory location over here. Now, what you could do is you can also tab to make a selection. So if you want to make a selection after the fact, you don't want to create a selection, you just want to select memory location number 1 to memory location number 2, I can tab, and it goes from memory location to memory location. So I hold down tab, and if I hold down the shift key and I hit tab again, it selects that area, which kind of does the same thing that Dave was showing, but in a different way. And you can do that with the shortcut. So if I go period 1 period, which is the shortcut to recall a memory location, hold down shift, period 2 period, it does exactly the same thing. Now, the final thing I'm going to show you is something that I use a lot because I'm a visual dude, and I think it helps in certain cases. But one of the things I'll often do when I'm in kind of an arranging mood is I'll go to my preferences, and I'm going to show my marker colors. And one thing that was different in Dave's and my system is you can see here that I've got each of my memory locations has a different color. And that's just a matter of personal preference. And I have that. One thing you can do is you can have your clips follow your marker colors. And what will happen, and this is really cool if you want to kind of think in terms of song structures or scenes. And you can see here as I move my memory location, it colors the clips based upon that. And if I wanted to change my color for the memory location, I could do that with the color palette window. So if I don't want that to be blue, I could go to markers, and I could call it, I don't know, tab over here.
That's typically how I have most of my sessions color coded. But the only criticism I have of that is that it's based on the clip boundary, isn't it?
That's the only thing, right? So it works in some cases. It doesn't work quite as well. A clip can't have 2 colors in Pro Tools, and I'll be honest. I think that is on balance for the good, because if I saw something change colors, I would assume it's a different clip. So Dave is 100% right, 0% wrong, that if the front of the boundary is after or within the marker location, you could see here that these guys are yellow, but the one in front of it isn't, because the start of that one doesn't fall within. And if I do this, you can see as soon as I cross over that threshold, that will change. So usually when I'm working, if I'm working on arrangements, I'll split on the grid, or I'll, so right now it's bar grid. So if I was doing a musical arrangement, that might be a way that I work. And it's just, one of those ways to get the desktop doing what you want it to do visually.
Yeah, so you can work around that by creating that split, can't you? To get it all working in the right way. So
so what I'll usually do is I'll set my grid to be whatever I want it to be, and then go up to edit, and then you separate clips at grid. So you're over at separate, and then you choose at grid.
So going back to the original question, that a feature request that you could be able to jump between your markers, and Andy just showed us with tab, you can jump to the next marker, and option tab will jump to the previous marker.
Exactly right.
All you need to do is just click into the marker ruler and then use tab or option tab. So there you go.
So another feature that we're very glad to to say is actually in there, and it's not just jumping from one to the next, is it? We can go to specific ones. Really powerful feature. Very cool. Okay, the next one is...
And markers, we just barely scratched the surface about with memory locations and window configurations nested into them. So there is so much to do there.
I mean, it's a whole nother show.
Exactly. Every single thing we talk about has 45 minutes worth of show dedicated to it, if people are going to ask the right questions.
Just speaking about what you said earlier about the education system, so most everything we've talked about so far is basically the Pro Tools 101 course, which is a great course, and you can even buy the book and just read it yourself, and all of these things are in there, or most of these things. A couple of things have been 110 things as well.
And you can get certified at a school like Siegen or Tonkraftwerk, and you can prove to the world that you've learned that stuff.
We'll just give Anders all the work.